So you think Dracula has his own stash of meteor shit? Alright everyone, hello and welcome to a new episode of the Screenplay Archaeology podcast. I'm your host, KiramidHead.
And I am LeadingBlind, aka just Star.
Who practically begged me for an invite to this, and then I gave her one, and she read the script. She's like, eh!
You flat out liar. Flat out lies. Although I did not, yeah, that's for sure. Like, something tells me a person does not have to twist your arm.
No. But this was just one I picked up just completely at random looking at my script list. Because I'm like, it's a vampire thing. She'll do this.
Damn straight.
But, tonight we're looking at, the last voyage of the Demeter, which is one of these projects which has been kicking around in Hollywood for like 17 years now. It's on its 6th director currently, and I'll get into some of this before and some of this after we could talk about the script, because this is like a very specific draft. But before we do any of that stuff, I just want to get my usual plugs and whatnot out of the way. Of course, if you like this show and you want to listen to something on a similar subject matter, there's the Shelved podcast, which is supposed to have an episode out sometime like this week or early next week, so go ahead and check them out. And also there's a Table Reads podcast where they take unproduced scripts and they do like full-on reads of the scripts, which is very fun to listen to. They're currently just finished reissuing one of their sets of episodes on Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian, and they were renovating their studio, but they're gonna have something new out next week, so check them out. So my plugs are finally meaning something. And also, if you have any comments, questions, or anything, shoot an email to screenplayarchaeology@outlook.com. And I just want to say now, if I take a while to get an email back to you, it's because Outlook's app is a piece of shit and doesn't always give me a notification when I have a new email, so it's like, haha. But yeah, send an email there. Also, check us out on our social media pages. We're on Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, and the show, of course, is available on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, Google Play Music, and maybe Pandora if they ever get back to me on that. And, so leave a review on one of those platforms, and I'll do my best to sort of check those, and maybe I'll read one out in case I get a new one. But yeah, moving on, we're going to talk about, The Last Voyage of the Demeter, which is a script which is taking the chapter from the original novel Dracula, where Dracula gets on the ship the Demeter to go from Transylvania to England, and it's basically structured around that voyage, and it's basically set up like Alien with a vampire.
Something like that.
Well, that was actually the impetus for writing this, was that. Gotta catch my breath there for a second for some reason. But, Bragi Shute, the original writer, he wanted to write something like Alien, but he realized that, you can't set it in space without it just coming off like a ripoff. And he said he was meeting one of his friends who was a prop guy, and he had the model ship of the Demeter from the Coppola movie. And that just sort of, kicked off the inspiration for this. And I think it's kind of funny because the draft we have is dated December 2006. And the most recent revisions are by James V. Hart, who wrote that movie. So that must have been a bizarre experience for him.
Well, it certainly sounds like a prop I would want.
Yeah, and it's like, wow, I wrote this scene. This is like a 5-minute scene with narration way back in 1992. 14 years later, I'm working on the same thing.
Yeah, probably a little surreal or like deja vu.
But he wrote this, but Shute wrote the original draft, and I believe it was his other script he wrote, which did eventually get made, which was Season of the Witch with Nicolas Cage. That got put into
not a bad movie.
I've not actually seen it, but his script was actually an award-winning, like it won like a contest, I think, and that kind of got him some clout and got the engine greased, so to speak. And that got this script, it got picked up, and there was a director who was attached to this named Robert Schwentke from like 2004, and he was attached to it for years and years and years. And I want to say it was from around this period when this draft was written, because his name is on it as one of the revisions as well. And so just, we don't really have a whole lot of, like, Dracula background to talk about with this specifically, because, the depictions of the Demeter have been fairly sparse when you think about it.
Yeah, now correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't the Demeter based on some real ship crash that happened, or was there a ship called the Demeter or something like that, or am I pulling that clear out of my ass?
I don't think it was actually called the Demeter, but there was like a shipwreck, I think, when Bram Stoker was visiting Whitby that he read about or something. And that
okay, got
it. And I believe like the wreck was still there or something like that. Like it's a weird story, but like the depictions of it on film at least. You have the original Nosferatu, which is probably the most famous. And probably the most accurate to the book, actually. That's probably the scene.
Yeah, I did see that movie, but I hated it, so I don't remember that scene.
Wow, the silent version?
Yeah, it just wasn't for me.
Yeah. Though the boat scene is actually really good. It's pretty close to, cause the whole, I think it's in the book where like the first mate goes below deck and then he comes back up and jumps overboard.
Yeah.
Yeah, that comes from the book, and they do that in the movie. That's pretty cool. And they do almost the exact same sequence in the Herzog remake, so.
Yeah.
And
I remember they also had the Demeter crash in the Frank Langella movie.
Oh yeah, that's right. I always forget about that because it's like 5 seconds at the beginning of the movie.
But it's there!
And by the time you get to the end, there's all this other shit that's happened. It's like, oh yeah, there was a shipwreck. And of course you have the Bela Lugosi version where it's, jerky stock footage from a silent movie.
Yeah.
And it's just him standing there by like a door watching, and then you get the idea that he killed all of them. And you still have the stock footage in the Spanish version, but there's a little bit more added to it.
Yeah.
But it's not a lot. And like, even the Christopher Lee version doesn't have a boat.
Well, I think you're right. It's been a really long time since I've seen any of the Lee ones.
Oh,
and that's...
Horror of Dracula totally doesn't have a boat because it doesn't take place in London.
Yeah.
For budget reasons, they couldn't afford a boat, so they just said, we're gonna set you in Germany somewhere, and you're like literally like 3 hours away from the castle.
I think I vaguely remember something like that, yeah.
Because even though at the beginning with Harker's narration, he's like, I've made this long, tiring journey, and at the end of the movie, they get there in like an hour. And
I have a comment to that, but it would be insensitive.
Oh, yeah. And then, of course, you have the, and then, like, the only other one I can really think of is, the Coppola version, where he's the Wolfman for some reason.
Something like that. Yeah, I remember the crash in the Coppola version. I can't remember any others. The closest I can come to is the plane crash in Dracula 2000. But it would surprise you how many actual Dracula movies I've not seen, in spite of my vampire addiction.
I have never seen Dracula 2000. I've seen Dracula 3000, where it's a spaceship.
Oh, God. I'm sorry.
Have you seen that?
I have. I'm sorry.
This is how they used to smuggle weed back in the day. That movie's so stupid.
Yeah, and the crosses before all religion was banned, or whatever the case is.
I forgot about it. I just remember them finding coffins in the hold, and Coolio was talking about how they used to smuggle weed in these back in the day. Like, this is how they used to smuggle dead bodies back in the day. And I remember Dracula.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say I remember Dracula was even barely in it.
Yeah, I don't think he was. It was about as useful as Jason in space.
Jason actually did way more in space than Dracula did, if you can believe it.
Yeah, but I must have seen them close together, because I'm like, they blend together for me.
I mean, Jason X is not a very good movie, but he does have a body count in that.
True.
So
no, but I was just gonna say that I know Dracula 2000 gets a bad rap, but I actually kind of love it. It's more of a guilty pleasure, but I still kind of love it.
Isn't that the one where they make him Judas?
Yes.
Yes, that's not the weirdest thing I've seen done with Dracula.
No, definitely not. And I actually have the second one too, which I also kind of like.
Oh,
but
yeah,
it's just something new.
That's right, they made 3 of those movies.
I got 2. I've seen bits and pieces of the third one. It's horrible, but Rutger Hauer's appeal as a vampire lost its appeal long before then.
So even before, no, I'm gonna leave the Salem's Lot remake out of this, but no, the weirdest thing I've seen done with Dracula. Have you seen Blade Trinity?
No, I couldn't even get through the second one, I'll be honest.
They straight up say Dracula is Dagon in that, and he's like some ancient demon.
Okay!
And he's played by He's probably the worst on-screen Dracula I've seen, and that's saying something.
Well, if you want to go with the hate that Andy has, you could say the worst Dracula potentially could be the guy from Van Helsing, but that's just badly acted.
The guy from Van Helsing has personality.
Yes, which is what I love about him. Gnaw on that scenery, damn it, go for it.
The guy from Dracula, the guy from Blade Trinity is a guy. I mean, I think he was on Prison Break, but he's like so just not even giving a performance. He's just like some bland pretty boy, and he walks into a store full of. He just happens to find the one store in this city full of Dracula themed merchandise, including dildos. I just remember watching that and going, "What the fuck am I looking at?"
Yeah, I'm so into vampires that I joke that it's a fetish, but some things are just going a little too far.
Yeah, I mean, Dracula doesn't even really do much in that movie. He just kind of hangs around and he kidnaps a baby for no reason.
Alright, well.
But let's get to the script.
Yeah, sounds good.
Alright, so the basic synopsis of this is that we're following... it's set, 1897, usual Dracula time frame, although I have to point out that if going by Stoker's notes, it actually takes place in 1893, but whatever.
We can forgive a few, date issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's still better than, that so-called official sequel novel where they reset the events of the original to 1888 just to tie it in with Jack the Ripper for no reason.
I could say something about that, but you'll probably never speak to me again.
What, you like that book?
Kinda, yeah. I mean, I know it's horrible, but I kind of love the book. I got it on audio from the library.
I don't even know what happened to my physical copy, but yeah, at least you admit it's horrible.
And in spite of the problems with it, I was like, I love this, and it would just rock my world if they got Coppola and the original cast of the Bram Stoker's movie and made it again. Because it'd just be hilarious and great.
I mean, everybody loves Keanu now, so he could probably get it made.
Yeah, maybe he can pull off a better British accent by now, though I doubt it.
Although if they adapted that book, he'd barely be in it, because he's like the second person to die.
Exactly, so it would work in his favor.
You killed John Wick with a stake up the ass? Come on. But, okay, joking aside. It's the plot is that it starts off in 1897 Romania, and there's this I don't know if you heard that, but the garbage truck outside made a loud noise. Jesus,
I couldn't hear it.
Okay, but no, it's not this guy called Alec, a Romanian name if I've ever heard one.
I love the names in the script, by the way.
Yeah, there's some amusing names here, but he's he's just this regular kind of working peasant guy, and his young son gets snatched by Dracula as he's leaving in his carriage to head to the port at Varna to leave on the Demeter, and so he pursues, and he ends up, getting, a position on the ship, and the ship, sets sail, and there's, the usual thing with, the crew disappearing one by one, which is basically what happens in that chapter of the book, but we've kind of expanded it out to its own thing, and, weird stuff starts happening, this mold kind of takes over the ship, and there's a female stowaway who becomes kind of, sort of important. And, there's conflicts amongst the crew and all that sort of thing. And so that's the basic summary. Now, like I said before, this is dated December 18th because the watermark is covering it, 2006. By the way, damn you, Stephanie, you don't have to write your name on this. You're not in kindergarten anymore. But, it has, but it's by Bragi Shute, who wrote the original draft, and has, revisions by Robert Sventke and Mitch Bryan. And when there's the ampersand, that means they wrote it together. And he was supposed to direct, and there are current revisions by James V. Hart. So, like I said, it must have been a weird experience for him having to write this scene all over again as a whole movie.
Yeah, just a little.
And I do kind of have to wonder what he added to this. And I have a theory about that as we move forward, but I'll get to that when that scene hits.
Okay.
Okay, so getting into this, it has this sort of in media res opening, which doesn't really add anything except for like a weird image at the beginning, but it's a woman's body floating among kelp over the sea, and then the camera moves up, and you don't see her face, by the way, and it fades to Romania in 1897, where Alec is working on a bridge. He's building this bridge along the Borgo Road, and his son Nico is nearby, who for some reason I thought was his younger brother when I started reading this.
It does have a kind of ambiguous age thing to it, because the way they describe Alec, he seems kind of like young.
Yeah, and so, Nico is nearby playing with their dog Barack. And so the sun's setting, and we find out later, like much, much later on, that Alec is well aware of the vampire, so he's working maybe a little too late here.
Yeah, it's if you know the lore of your region and you know it's real and you're ignoring it, then you're just kind of an idiot at that point.
And so, he goes to Alec goes to gather his tools. Barack gets spooked, and he runs off into the woods, and so Nico disappears from sight. And Alec goes after him on horseback, finding Barack's corpse, so Dracula killed a dog, and traces of wagon wheels, and he sees a castle on the mountaintop in the distance, which was described pretty cool, like it was carved directly out of the mountain.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that.
And it doesn't look like a guy sitting in a chair for no reason. Coppola.
I still think that's one of the cooler castle designs, but that's just, I'm one of those nuts.
Yeah, but it's a cool design, but it's like, why? I just tried to figure it out, like,
because I'm Francis Ford Coppola and I can do what I want, goddammit.
I'm going to homage every silent movie special effect ever made in this movie, because I finally have money now after Godfather 3, after being bankrupt for a decade.
Exactly.
But, okay, and so he follows the wagon tracks to the road, where he's nearly run over by 3 wagons full of boxes, and I'm like, I don't think the tracks here quite make sense, but whatever. But, and they're followed by this black coach, which doesn't make any noise at all, which is kind of a creepy image. And so Alec sees...
It is!
Yeah. Alec sees Nico's face peering out from the coach's window, only for a mysterious white face to appear and pull Nico away. And so he pursues the coach and wagons, which always seem to stay just out of reach, all the way to the port of Varna on the Black Sea. Now, here's the thing here. They say it's the Borgo Road, but they also say it's the Argash River, and the Argash River Borgo Road is way up towards the north of Romania. Argash is way down towards the south. In fact, that's where the Dracula's real castle, Vlad the Impaler's real castle would have been, is around that area.
I was just trying to figure out how long have they been going at this point? Because by the time he gets there, I'm like, have they been going on for days?
Yeah, they don't have supernatural aid to help them on their way at this point yet, so.
No.
Because they do cover their tracks pretty well with how long the voyage takes.
Yeah, they do. And especially just the horse ride. I'm like, is this ever going to end? I'm not reading a novel, right?
Yep. And so when he gets there, some police approach him, handing him the wanted poster for an English servant woman who said she turned on her master and stole his horse, and he just kind of brushes them off because he's not interested.
Yeah, I gotta find my son. I don't give a shit. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so Alec, he finds the boxes in the coach being loaded onto a ship called the Demeter by a group of gypsies who are overseen by Tisma, the ship's first mate, who's basically here to be the asshole. And there's a sailor named Abramov, who is basically sort of Tisma's lackey throughout this thing.
Yeah, some of the roles are a little questionable. Like, what do you do?
And so the gypsies, they see night beginning to fall, so it's been like a day at least.
Yeah. It's been at least a night and a day.
And so Tisma has to hire some local sailors to finish the job and join the voyage. And Alec tries to get the job, and he's further incentivized when he sees a shadowy figure standing on the deck, touching a young boy's shoulder. But Tisma turns him down, saying, I don't want you because I just don't like you for no reason. But then one of the new sailors spots the dragon crests that are on the boxes, calling it a bad omen, just before the crane breaks and one of the boxes crushes him to death. So that's just bad luck.
Yeah.
And then the newly hired sailors take the body and run off. And so Alec goes, hey, they left. I can do the job. And so he gets the job because the Captain James shows up and he intervenes and lets Alec come aboard. Now, here's the thing I have to point out that I think is interesting because it's very specific in the book that the Demeter is a Russian ship. Yet here the captain is English.
Yeah, the captain's English, and the only name that I can find that's anywhere near close to saying, hey, Russian ship is Petrovsky.
And Abramov, maybe.
Maybe. That one seems like it's a universal Eastern European type name, maybe.
But, I mean, it could fit.
It could.
And of course, I mean, if this is a ship that's going all the way around Europe and, goes throughout the Mediterranean, stuff like that, of course they're going to pick up, sailors from all over the place.
Yeah. International crew, yes.
I mean, it makes a certain amount of sense. But Alec, He makes his way below decks because this guy is not wasting any time at all. And he goes past the cook and Surgeon Blake, so that's a couple of interesting jobs to mix up. He's like Andy Serkis in King Kong, where he just has like every job on the ship. You have the steam engine operators Petrovsky and Olgarin, because it's a steamship that also has sails in this version.
It's a weird hybrid, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I feel like the steam engine stuff, the steam stuff is here so they can do stuff with the steam engine. Like there's
the boiler room.
Yeah, there's specific things they do with that engine room later on.
Yeah, and things like that probably did exist for specific reasons, but I don't know. Demeter does not seem like it would be that.
Yeah, I always just kind of assumed the Demeter was a sailing ship.
Yes, it seems like a, what do you call those? Clipper ship to me.
Yeah, it's called, I think they say it's a schooner in the book.
Schooner.
I don't know boats.
A schooner's a multi-sailed, pretty big ship.
Okay. I'll take your word for it. But he also meets a Turkish sailor named Murad before he gets to the forward hold. Now that's interesting because Murad II was he was the Turkish sultan who held Vlad and his younger brother as hostages for a good chunk of their life.
Oh, yeah.
So that could be an intentional reference.
Possible. I mean, another character we'll get to. I kept thinking of another vampire story author every time his name came up, but
we'll get to him. But
I missed that one.
Was that Abramoff?
No, the vampires, Renfield, the Ponari?
Oh, Ponari. Okay, yeah, we'll get to him.
Yeah, we'll get to him.
Yeah, but the smell in the hold is like really, really bad. Like, I mean, it's described as almost overwhelming, but Alec, he keeps looking for Nico, only to find his corpse lying in filth, as it says, inside the coach. And the body collapses into dust at the slightest touch, so Dracula drained this thing fucking dry.
Yeah, and then apparently absorbed every last ounce of other moisture over time after that.
Well, I mean, he needed one last snack before he goes to sleep on the voyage, but that doesn't last very long.
No, at all. Not at all.
And there's some black silt of some kind pours out of the coach as Alec gathers what's left of Nico's clothes. Like, he takes, like, his bloody shirt, basically.
Interesting souvenir, but if you need proof, I guess.
Okay, and yeah, after, well, it's like a sentimental thing.
Yeah.
But so, there's a bit of banter between the sailors and the galley, and then Captain James has a breakfast cooked for Mr. Ponari, who's this mysterious passenger who is always remaining in his stateroom, and he has the boy, Sean, deliver it to him. And then Petrovsky takes a meal to Olgarin and finds Alec collapsed in the corridor and looking ill, and he carries him to a berth where Alec is like half in and half out of sleep, and he sees a giant approach and give him some sort of remedy, and he has a creepy dream about Nico playing with a strange demon toy and awakes just as a pale hand grabs him. And he meets Sean as he awakes, who explains that he's the captain's great nephew, and his dad died in the Navy and stuff like that. And the giant is a South Seas native named Moluko, who's good with healing remedies. He is basically just Queequeg, right down to the superstition and everything.
I'm sorry, I don't get that specific reference.
Moby Dick.
Okay.
He's like a South Seas whale harpoonist who's like superstitious and stuff.
Yeah. I'm not as well versed in the era that the Dracula story takes place in, like the late 19th century. How severe were superstitions still accepted? I mean, some of these people, like, Maluko, okay, he's from a different area. He could have more severe superstitions. But I'm like, what is Tisma and other people? I'm like, seriously? You're going to be pulling this in this era?
Well, sailors are kind of stereotypically superstitious.
Yeah, okay. Maybe that's all it was then.
Yep. And so, he also mentions that, Mr. Ponari is the one paying for the box's transportation, and that he hasn't been seen for a while. And I've mentioned Ponari here because in this version, they know full well they have a passenger on the ship with them. In the book, they have no clue. They just take a bunch of boxes on board, and then they start getting picked off.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting sort of complication for this script to have, and if you're going to, make this thing, beef it up into a whole movie, you need little twists like that, and I think it works okay.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with having, like, a last-minute-ish passenger that's paid to be in a stateroom or whatever, but then they get to the other passenger. Then I'm like, really? You just have to keep piling it up?
Oh, we're getting to that, now.
Yeah. You already have one paying passenger. What would one more really been?
Alec sneaks down to the hold again in an attempt to get revenge, but instead runs into and scuffles with a stowaway who turns out to be a young woman. And the way he figures this out is hilarious is because he's trying to keep her from attacking him, and he throws his arm around and he goes the fuck when he feels tits.
Yeah, these aren't normally here. Oh, really? Okay.
And so the commotion attracts the crew, who take her away to bring her to the captain. And Alec takes one last look back into the hold as he leaves, and we see that the black material from the coach is still pouring out. And as they leave, Tisma bars and chains the door shut, and a few spots of black fungus are shown growing on the outside. And so that's this thing that's going on throughout this, where the disgusting filth from the coffins and whatnot is grown into this weird black demonic fungus that Dracula is controlling to move the boat around.
Yeah, it's the green slime of the ship now.
It's the
black pink slime.
It's
pink
the black goo from Prometheus, except not quite.
Oh God, yeah, perfect. I'm in pink slime now.
They hold a hearing of sorts in the galley, and they seem to meet in the galley all the time. Where the stowaway, she's an English woman named Helen Bryce Edgerton, which is the most English name imaginable.
She's the only person that we know with a full name.
Yeah, it's Captain James. Well, Alec has a full name.
I must have missed it.
When he's signing up, he says his full name is Alexei Radu, which, first off, Alexei...
Yeah, I remember. I was when I was skimming the script to take notes again last night, I was I know I saw that name. Where did I see it? And I must have missed it that time.
Yeah, and they keep calling him, and Tisma keeps calling him Radu. And I have to point out...
Radu is another reference.
And I have to point out, Alexei sounds like a Russian name. And
yeah,
Radu is a Romanian first name last time I checked. That was Vlad the Impaler's brother. One
it
of
is.
them.
So I was are you really gonna do this? I mean, maybe it's a common name, so I'm making something out of nothing, but okay, you want to show off your lore. Got it.
But she's saying, she doesn't have any papers to show the crew because her master burned them. And it takes a while to get her backstory in this it doesn't need to take as long as it does.
No. And for her, okay, you understand why she's keeping it quiet, but Alec is a little slow on the uptake here.
Yeah, and also, I think we might as well say this right now. She is almost it's almost like we've taken a sharp turn back to classic Hollywood, where we're adapting a book that might not have a woman in it and putting her in there, but not for any real reason.
Feminist reasons! Yay!
But she doesn't do anything.
Yeah, but the feminist reasons don't always work. I like a strong female character as much as the next man or woman, but they have to be a strong character. And if it's not there, you don't need her.
In action, at least have a role in the story. She just kind of talks to people.
She's the classic DID.
Yeah.
Damsel, the damsel in distress.
Dissociative identity disorder. But, no, things start getting intense when Mr. Ponari arrives, and he insists that they not drop her off at the nearest port, as he says the terms of the voyage were to make no stops before arriving in England. But what if we run out of food? Keep working, damn it.
Yeah, it's he's already, the vampire's already gonna be picking off these people. We're in a horror movie. We know this script is gonna have this. So you don't need an excuse, really, but,
Yep. And so,
I think they do.
And okay, so he pays the captain extra to allow her to stay on board, and even agrees to let Helen stay in his room's small storage area for the duration of the voyage. And Alec, where he recognizes Ponari's face from the carriage earlier, almost pulls a knife on him during all of this, but Tisma stops him and he actually confiscates his knife. And there's this whole thing with Alec's knife where it's I want my knife back, and he doesn't get it back, and he gets it back at the end, and it's played like it's this significant thing.
Yeah, it just is what it is, though. That's all it is.
And I will say here that Tisma is actually acting pretty reasonably, because Alec is kind of suspicious at this point, but he doesn't stay reasonable the whole thing.
One of the only moments in the entire script where Tisma is halfway reasonable and halfway decent, because he's tied, really, for number one dick of the ship. But
Dracula kind of has to take that role.
Well, I'm not saying the biggest villain. I'm just saying the biggest dick.
Oh, him and
villain.
Abramoff.
Yes.
All right. And so, also, I have to mention Abramoff. Once Helen gets revealed, his entire role is to basically be Mr. Gibbs from the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Because, I mean, I swear he says more than once it's bad luck to have a woman on board, and he might as well add even miniature ones.
Yeah, I'm like, he is so freaking creepy, and he doesn't even, I mean, at least in Pirates of the Caribbean, it's like, well, he's entertaining about it. This guy is just like, you are total Mr. Rapey, get away from me.
Well, he's only creepy in, like, that beginning scene, and then he comes back later, and he's like, whatever. But Abramoff is just here, and he likes to repeat that one superstition a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, Murad is placed on first watch in the hold to make sure no one else interferes with the cargo, and Tismo orders Alec to replace Petrovsky once first watch is over on deck. And so Sean prepares Helen's quarters in that storage closet, and she has a moment with Ponari, who talks about life and death and how particular he is with his cargo before leaving her for the night. And the way Ponari's dialogue is written, it's like they're very specifically trying to give him almost like a Bela Lugosi kind of feel to him, like that sort of vampire character.
Yeah, it has that feeling of that I can potentially enthrall you while you're terrified, and I have this creepy neck rapey vibe to me, but at the same time I'm reading the script going, red herring. Red herring.
Yeah, it's
fucking herring.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, he's about as much of a red herring as Red Herring from Scooby-Doo. I mean, it's not hard to figure out where this is dead. It's not going to be him.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and maybe off the page with casting, it could maybe work a little bit better depending on casting and directing, but who knows?
Right.
But, while all this is going on, we see that the mold in the hold, I made like a Dr. Seuss rhyme in my notes, it continues to grow, and breathing sounds are heard around the boxes. And yeah, so this fungus continues to grow. I'd almost wonder if this is somehow it eventually just kind of overtakes the ship at some point. And I almost wonder if this is he kind of read the book, and in the book, you know, the soil in the coffins is described as being, it's called mold at least once or twice there. So I wonder if that was sort of the inspiration, as well as the idea from Nosferatu of the vampire, you know, being the plague bringer and stuff like that, and the bringer of disease. If maybe we're expanding on those ideas.
I was wondering a little bit about that too, because I'm like, well, on the one hand, was it described that way before they put it in the boxes and onto the Demeter, or was it afterwards when they were breaking the crates open? Because, yeah, they're going into a wet environment in the dark. There's going to be mold.
I mean, it's that, or, you know, vampires can't go under running water, so Dracula hasn't taken a shower in a very long time. You know, I guess even the vampire's crotch rod is supernatural. Okay, so the animals, by the way, I forgot to mention, they're transporting a whole bunch of animals as well. They're in like
they're
freaking out, and when Murad goes to investigate, he finds himself standing in a pool of blood before being engulfed by a shadowy black thing. And meanwhile, on deck, Petrovsky catches a glimpse of what seems to be like a white face floating by just before the thick fog bank rolls in and covers the ship.
Yep.
And so that's a creepy moment, and I think the scene down below decks is well written in kind of, you know, the kitty scene from Alien kind of way.
Yeah, a little bit eerie.
Only Murad doesn't say enough of this kitty crap. But and I should mention, because while Alec comes forward to replace him, he says that Petrovsky says, we're moving into the Aegean now. And we did get a little bit of narration from the captain's log explaining how they had to bribe the Turkish customs people, which is from the book. And so that means they've passed the Bosporus. And now they're passing through the Dardanelles to get to the Aegean, but Petrovsky says, we've just passed Constantinople. Yeah, you would have passed it already by now. But so, you know, they talk for a bit, and they both talk about having seen a white face, and Alec is about to tell Petrovsky about how he got here, but then he has them both begin walking to the bridge to get Tisma to sound the foghorn, and Alec is holding on to the back of Petrovsky's shirt when the ladder is yanked away into the fog, and he can hear all these noises of horrible things happening, but when the fog recedes, he's gone, and all Alec has is just a piece of his shirt.
Yeah, I guess I don't have a lot to say about that. I'm like, I kind of like the imagery of him holding onto the shirt, and I kind of don't, and...
You kind of don't?
Yeah, the fog part of it is fun and cool and always works in movies like this, but it's also done to death, so I'm kind of either way about it.
Oh, I thought it was the shirt you said you weren't liking.
Well, no, it was, yeah, the shirt part, I was like, could give or take it. It's interesting. It's different. It definitely implies what the fuck just happened.
Yeah.
And how fast it happened.
And I think if it was properly directed, it would have been pretty cool. But also, I do have one thing to say. The whole picking off one by one thing, it's not exactly one by one if he takes two people in one night.
Yeah.
That's not a complaint. It's just an observation.
Yeah. I mean, it is one by one if he's taking one person and then waiting an hour, but it's just a much, much shorter timeline.
Yeah. Let's not debate the details of what constitutes one by one.
No, probably best.
And so a number of the crew, they come to the deck to see what's happened, and the captain doesn't immediately believe Alec's story about something snatching Petrovsky. And there's a line the captain says where it's like, the Aegean gave up its monsters after, long since the Greeks. And I'm like, that makes it sound like the Greeks don't exist anymore.
Yeah, it's like, I understand you're referring to the fact that, people are smarter than that now, but that's not how it's coming across.
And the idea that the captain is this kind of well-read, scholarly guy does kind of come across in the way his dialogue is written, so I do like that.
Yeah, I do like the captain a lot, actually. He's one of the few characters where I'm like, see, I can stand behind this guy. He makes sense, and maybe not as much at the end, because then it's just the very stereotypical captain, but he still makes sense. He's not as superstitious, he's not as gullible, he's not as a lot of things you usually see and read about when you're reading captain stuff, or the rest of the crew.
Well, and so this is where Tizma accuses Alec producing the piece of Nico's shirt that Alec had stashed in his berth, which Alec just straight up fights him and punches him in the face at this point, but the captain breaks them up. And so he takes them below deck to search for, and I will say, Tizma's being a dick, but he kind of has a point here.
Yeah, this guy's got this, and this happened to this guy, and what the fuck?
And he has been acting kind of suspicious this whole time.
Right.
And so the captain takes them below decks to search for the missing men, and they go to the stateroom to question Ponari, only to find that his bed is not slept in and he's not there. Ooh. And
bed's not slept in. God forbid he make his own bed.
Yeah, and so they question Helen, who claims to, or just be a really light sleeper, or sleeps on top of the covers. They question Helen, who claims, but Alec, he recognizes Helen from the wanted poster finally, but he doesn't say anything. And so the captain orders the two of them, send the two guys who don't like each other to go further down by themselves to question old Garen and Murad. And they end up fighting each other instead and splitting up. And I'm like, guys, leave your petty bullshit behind for a second. and of course, Alec totally wins that fight.
Right.
The captain finds Ponari on deck, who once again acts mysteriously before disappearing at the first sight of dawn.
Ooh, spooky and suspicious. Not.
Yeah, and so Alec continues down the lower corridor to look for Murad, but finds the corpses of the viciously slaughtered animals strewn about instead, and runs to the deck covered in blood, alerting the crew as to what's happened. And so, as the days go on, we see, the animal remains are thrown overboard, and the voyage continues, and Tizma, Blake, and Abramoff, they start plotting against Alec and Helen, holding them responsible, and Abramoff keeps going on about how, mighty bad luck to have a woman on board, arr! And they change course to, and it says that the captain only agrees to put in at Tabarka, which is in North Africa, and sort things out there. And as they change course to move into the harbor, we see the mold has spread to the engine. And Olgarin sees something moving in the shadows and calls to the sleeping Abramoff for help. And while the captain is preoccupied on deck, Alex slips below and grabs a harpoon he stashed away in a closet and bumps into Helen, telling him he knows who she is, and tells her not to trust Ponari and encourages her to disembark when they land at Tabarka. At the bridge, the captain and Tizma steer the ship towards land through the fog, only to find that Tabarka has seemingly disappeared from land, and after noticing several small spots of mold on the compass, the captain orders they resume their westerly course.
Yeah. I think I finally figured out what the heck that mold reminds me of, and you're going to laugh your ass off.
What?
I just keep thinking it grows on you.
The creep show segment?
Yes. I'm like, that's about right.
So meteor.
I mean, it's a creepier imagery, but
so you think Dracula has his own stash of meteor shit?
It's entirely possible.
But no, that's actually a pretty creepy. I like the idea of this scene where it's like they can't even put into port. That's how powerful this vampire is. He can make them not even see where they're going. Like he's
It
almost,
is an interesting new thing to add.
Like he's
well, we don't know it's completely.
Like it's almost like he's pulled them into like a pocket dimension of some sort.
That was an interesting feel, especially with other things that happen in a little bit. And it is cool. I did like the different things he might be capable of. Like, he can clearly get inside your frickin' head because God knows what's really happening right around you.
Yep. And so Sean is at the rear deck, and he's walking through what he thinks at first is tar, but turns out to be blood.
Mm.
And so Alec and Helen come above deck, where he stashes the harpoon he literally just got out of a stash behind a hatch. And Helen explains she was a governess watching after a widowed man's children. And she doesn't say any more about what happened between them, but Alec's like, yeah, I get the idea.
Yeah, she does imply that he got handsy. Like, she doesn't say handsy, but she's like, he wanted more than my job description called for, is essentially what she says.
Yeah, she says that in a later scene.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but it's like, the exposition is spread out between those two scenes.
Yeah. See, my stupid eyes, it's hard to go back and double check what happened. So,
yeah.
Sorry.
Well, that's why I take all these notes, so I don't forget shit.
Yeah.
And so to hear Sean crying... Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I spent so much time just trying to be able to read the font that I couldn't even concentrate on notes at the time.
Yeah, because of the name written across it.
Yeah.
But they hear Sean crying, and they find him spattered with blood, and he points them to a mast, whose furled sails are dripping with blood. And Maluko helps unfurl them, and Murad's severed head comes tumbling out. And they describe the sail as being streaked with blood, and I'm like, okay, James Hart, you added that in, didn't you, as a reference to your other Dracula movie?
Cool imagery, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it works.
At least here, there's not a random wolf man running around on deck. A wolfman rapist, to be specific.
To be fair, I don't remember you seeing the wolf man until he gets to Whitby Bay. Definitely.
You do see him. You do see flashes of him on the deck in the movie.
Oh, I don't remember flashes of that. But then again, I don't see very well. So if it was, brief enough, I could have easily missed it. I just remember the fully formed wolf jumping off the deck.
Yeah, you see him like laying in his coffin. He's in like this weird membrane or something, and then you see his face morph into like the wolf, and then you kind of see it standing there, and you see like blood spatter on the sail and stuff like that.
Oh, right. The cargo hold moment. Okay. Yeah. See, it was hard for me to tell which metamorphosis he was in at the time. Okay, fair enough.
I mean, there's so much weird shit in that movie. It's easy to forget some of it. But
yeah. Well, with how many times I've watched it, you would think I would remember the shit.
Yeah, but I need to watch it again because it's one of those movies I'm kind of hot and cold on.
Mm.
But the funeral is held just for the head, I guess. They got just try like we did. It's supposed to be like this real serious burial at sea. But what did they do? Wrap the head in the sheet and just go boop.
Just drop kick it into the water.
I mean, I guess his entire body was in there somewhere, but they don't say that.
No, they don't.
But and this is where Tisma and his gang attack Helen, attempting to throw her overboard, and Alec, Sean, and the captain, and even Maluko, they intervene. And this is when Alec first openly accuses Ponari of being a vampire, preying on them all, and says, think about it. He acts weird, and we never see him during the day. And then Tisma looks over Alec's shoulder and goes, oh yeah? We should tell him that yourself. And Ponari's there on deck in broad daylight.
Yeah. Yeah, well, if you want to get extreme enough, if they want to borrow more from the Coppola movie, or even maybe from the book even. I don't remember if Dracula could move around during the day at all in the book.
He can.
Okay, yeah.
When he's, what they say in the book is that he can walk around during the day, he just can't use his powers.
Right.
And there's a bit where he's frantically trying to arrange his passage out of England after things go south, and he's running around on the docks with a straw hat.
Right.
One of those just weird images from that book. But so he talks to the captain, and Alec just goes to attack him with a sharpened splinter right here and there. But then Maluko knocks him out with his war club. And so Alec, he awakes in the engine room with Ulgarin chained up by his hands and feet. And Ulgarin mentions the shadow he saw earlier and how he tried to follow it, but that to no avail. And so they're both in agreement that something evil is stalking the ship, and Alec tries to break his chains with a coal shovel. And a meeting is held in Captain's quarters where he reprimands Tisma for his action on the deck. And I actually like this part where he says, I would have thrown you overboard myself right then and there if the crew wasn't already shorthanded.
Yeah.
And that's saying something, because you get the idea that this is a pretty tight-knit crew. They've traveled together a lot. And for him to say that, like,
Yeah.
the guy's gone way overboard compared to the usual.
Yeah, he has. But you could tell from the beginning there was tension, because the second the captain's like, oh, for fuck's sake, let him onto the ship already. We need the extra hands.
Yep.
Tisma's like talking to Alec like, oh, he thinks he's in charge, but let me tell you something. I run this ship.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, big shot. Say that to the captain's face. Let me see you do it.
Yeah. He orders Maluko and Olgarin to search the hold, including Ponari's crates, and has Tisma accompany Sean to the galley to get some food. And in the storage room, Helen finds a fancy carved box, is attempting to pry it open when Ponari comes calling. And she asks him for the truth of what happened with Alec, and he questions her about her past. And she confirms that her employer tried to force her into sex before she smacked him over the head with a fire poker and fled. So that's where we finally get the full story. And Ponari tells her that she reminds him of someone. He says he promises he'll look after her until they get to England. And so you're wondering, okay, what's up with this guy? And
well, he did have a son, so it's possible there's
And so outside the galley, Abramoff meets Tisma with a bottle of rum. They just leave Sean there, who's forced to return to quarters on his own.
Yeah, they're so protective of the cabin boy.
Yeah, they not very much. And so, Helen, she manages to get the box open and finds a lot of correspondence, papers, and a picture of a young woman. And in the boiler room, Alex manages to sever his arm chains, and he almost axes Helen when she bursts in to tell him what she's found out. And in the hold, Maluko and Olgarin have found that the boxes have become overgrown with the black fungus, and they see a shadowy figure approaching from the coach before they flee and bar the door behind them. And back in the boiler room, Helen tells Alec what she found in the box, and it turns out that Ponari is serving... It says, apparently in the papers, it's referred to as both Nosferatu and Dracula, in return for getting his daughter back, who has fallen under the vampire's spell. And I wonder if what they're saying here is Ponari's daughter, like one of the three brides?
I don't know.
I mean, they're not specific about it.
Apparently he likes to feast on kids. Apparently the Nosferatu in this version prefers to feast on definite kids or younger people. And that just makes me think of Lucy more than it makes me think of Dracula when somebody's feeding on specifically, younger. So it's more like a Blue for Lady thing than a Dracula thing in my book. But,
yeah. But I think Dracula will eat anything, practically, if he needs to. Yeah.
Well, he certainly went through livestock. So.
And I will say, he is referred to specifically as Nosferatu in the script from this point forward. So yeah, that's an interesting...
not a name, he is just a Nosferatu.
And then, Alec calls out, the deal Ponari made as a fake one, and that the vampire would never actually follow through with it. And so...
Yeah.
And while Abramoff and Tisma drunkenly fight on the bridge, Olgarin and Maluko return to the boiler room and free Alec from the rest of his chains, determining to fight the monster together.
Gotta stick together, right?
Yep. And then Helen comes across Nosferatu for the first time, feeding upon the dying Sean in the upper corridor. So yeah, they just killed the kid.
I saw it coming, but that one still crushed me a little bit. But then again, I have a hard time with kids in movies, so... And it's one thing if they're already established as creepy as fuck kids.
Yeah.
Like Rhoda from The Bad Seed, you can have just about anything happen to her right on screen. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, and the way he's described here is that his mouth, it's like he has multiple rows of teeth like a shark. And it's almost described like he has a cleft palate of some sort, like his mouth like splits open.
Yeah, it sounds like they're trying to do like shark plus Demogorgon or something weird.
Yeah, something a bit strange. Definitely a more monstrous, animalistic vampire.
Which I don't have a problem with, despite the stories I tend to like.
Yeah, and so it approaches her curiously, but the first light of dawn... This is so weird the way this is described. The first light of dawn shines through a chink in the shutters. It glints off her crystal pendant that she has and makes him step back, which is like, okay.
Yeah, the boat can't just be rocking and a spear of it comes through the shutters or something. Something, come on.
It's her, it's her kryptonite necklace or something. I don't know.
Yeah, this is not Lily from Legend. She doesn't need the mirror.
Or the Lily from the original script. But no, that's a whole other episode. Go listen to that one. But she then throws open as many shutters as she can, driving it off. And so the captain and the rest of the crew are alerted to the boy's death, and the captain is just completely knocked off his feet, devastated by it. And Alec tells Helen about how the vampire used to be his people's king, and he says he spilled enough blood to become death itself. And he mentions that he was very well aware of this thing and that he was trying to earn enough money to get his son away from there, but it was all for naught, and he's determined to kill this creature or die trying.
Further proof that this is knockoff areas of the Francis Ford Coppola version.
Really?
Well, they're talking about how he is Dracula, who was their king, which is... Dracula was just Dracula in the original novel. He wasn't, formerly this or that.
Well, there was an offhand reference by Van Helsing saying that he was.
Oh, was there? I don't...
Yeah, it's...
Nobody seems to remember that, so I'm glad you do.
Yeah, it's an offhand... It's a very offhand mention where he says he was the Voyage Dracula, which was the specific title that he would have held, and says that he says that he made some sort of deal with this group called the Cholamants or something like that.
Okay.
Which is like
Does this show you just how much the original novel bored the shit out of me?
But, okay, where was I in my notes?
Helen was about to open all the portholes.
Yeah, we got just past that part. Okay. In the galley, Alec has the remaining crew gathered along with a lot of weapons, stating his plan to go after the vampire during daylight while it has to sleep. And I like the fact that he points this out because so many vampire movies, they wait until like midnight to go looking for the coffin.
Yeah. At least this guy's smarter. He's like, no, now.
And the drunken wreck. Yeah, okay. And now Tisma, who has become just a total drunken wreck, he fights back against the idea. And during all of this, the fungus has spread to the galley and it infects Blake, who is consumed and then comes back as some kind of zombie, only for Alec to then kill him again with a few shots from a revolver. And his body collapses into a heap as he dies again. Yeah,
he's like this weird deteriorating Tarman version of this thing.
Ha, Tarman.
It was weird.
He doesn't.
I don't not like it. It was just weird.
I would have liked a little bit more development of the idea that this fungus can, like, control people.
Yeah.
Because we don't get... It usually just dissolves stuff, as we see.
And nobody else really seems to, like, get way too much of it on them, in spite of how much it seems to be overtaking the ship by it's like you're holding a compass that has this mold on it. You should be infected in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Okay, in the forward hold, Ponari tears the mold, holding the boxes together apart, and rips open one of the crates, sprinkling holy water on the soil and blessing it. So this guy's trying to get out of his deal. And so on the deck, we get some backstory from Maluko, and he says, as a boy, he saw a dead man rise from his grave and learned from a shaman how to combat some such creatures, and he's going to do the same here.
It was interesting. I mean, I don't think he had to be able to have that background, but it's interesting. It's there.
I mean, they gave him something at least, other than just...
Yeah.
Hey, I'm here.
It wasn't just, I heard the story. It was, no, this happened to me personally, so I get it.
And so they hold a funeral at sea for Sean, and then Tisma stirs up a ruckus once again, saying they should all abandon ship and take their chances in the lifeboat, despite the now very rough seas they're moving through. And ultimately he goes alone and disappears from sight, because even Abramoff is like, you're crazy.
Yeah, you are gonna flat out die, dude. And I don't want to.
And so Alec, he grabs the harpoon from earlier, and Maluko grabs his war club, and they're both ready for the hunt. And in the hold, Nosferatu confronts Ponari, calling him a traitor. Ponari counters, saying he's endangered his own plans by feeding so freely, and yeah, it does make him look kind of stupid, but in the book, Van Helsing does say, you know, the vampire has a child brain, so make of that what you will.
It's it's almost like a Scarlett O'Hara thing. It's like, I want what I want, and I want right now, and I can't see beyond that.
Yeah, she is the worst character in that movie.
Closely followed by Ashley Wilkes of all people, but we're not talking about Gone with the Wind, so.
No. Nosferatu, taunts him as to what he's become, and Ponari says he's come to terms with it, and he takes off his shirt and he reveals the scars from where he's let the vampire feed on him from time to time. So he's basically a human blood bag.
Blood doll.
And so he cuts himself once more, but Nosferatu attacks and lethally drains him from his throat. Alec and Maluko, they're searching the stateroom, and they break open one of Panari's trunks, and they find more paperwork, and they hear an unearthly scream as night falls. And in the lifeboat, Tisma is knocked around by rough seas, is consumed by a cyclone of mist and dies, so Dracula is that petty, he's gonna go to the one dude off in the lifeboat who's probably gonna die anyways, and goes and kills him.
Yep. No survivors, damn it. No risks. No this, no that, even though I caused half of it.
And this is where the Demeter gets swept up in a large storm front, which is described as the most epic storm ever.
Melodramatic much.
Yeah. And it's basically a supernatural storm under the vampire's control. And so Alec says that they have to... Alec tells the captain... On the bridge, Alec tells the captain about the 10 properties in London that the vampire has purchased, and plans to spread the crates around too, and he calls them bolt holes. And Alex says that they have to jettison everything the vampire has brought on board, and they determine to try and make for Gibraltar and get picked up by the British Navy. And so Abramoff and old Garin, they're in the boiler room trying to work the engines best they can when they hear a crash and call Alec down, showing him the body of Ponari after it crashed through the doors to the hold. And he dies then and there, begging Alec to finish him off. And so Alec and Helen take his body to the stateroom for the time being, and after they leave, the audience gets to see some blood spurting out from one of his wounds. So some foreshadowing. Foreshadowing something I had completely forgotten about from the other times I read this thing. And so we go back to the bridge, and Alec and the captain lash the wheel in place with some ropes to keep the ship on course for where they want to go, because Dracula is trying to push them to go towards the Atlantic so we can still get to England, but they're trying to move more in the other direction. And Alec spots a signal light somewhere out in the rain and dark, and so a British naval cutter from Gibraltar begins approaching the Demeter. The ropes holding the wheel in place snap, returning the ship to the original course and breaking the captain's arm. The steam engine explodes as well, killing old Garin, who manages to get Abramoff out of there just in time, but he still sustains serious burns on his legs. And so everyone on deck goes to unfurl the sails, but they've been rotted through by the fungus. And the remaining boat has had holes eaten into its bottom as well, as the water surrounding the Demeter has been infected too. Abramoff loses hope and hurls himself over the side, and then the cutter sails into the infected water and gets dissolved and sinks right then and there, and they all die. So a pretty large-scale sequence.
Yeah, the Nosferatu seems pretty OP in this version.
Yeah, and one thing I will say is that the guy hurling himself overboard, it's kind of lost in the middle of all that stuff going on. And it's a shame because that's kind of like a big moment in that chapter in the book and in Nosferatu and stuff like that. So it could have been done with a little more panache, I guess.
Right.
And so the Demeter gets pushed along at unnaturally fast speeds by the supernatural storm, and eventually Alec and Maluko begin lashing pikes together into a crossbow harpoon wooden stake weapon to use in the trap for the vampires. So they're MacGyvering their way out of this situation. And,
well, at least they're using their heads.
And Helen offers herself up as bait, knowing that the monster has a special interest in her. And as Maluko and Alec are setting that up, Nosferatu approaches Helen and begins to toy with her, using his claws to draw some blood. And that's when Ponari, now a vampire himself, emerges on deck, and Nosferatu just tosses her over to him and says, "A gift." I completely forgot that Ponari turns into a vampire in this from the last couple times I read this.
I think I must have completely missed it. I don't know how. Maybe my eyes were just really tired by that point, but I totally...
Yeah, you read it.
Sad, really.
Yeah, you read it surprisingly quickly.
Yeah, I did. I sat down. It kind of had me, had me interested, so I definitely sat there and read it, but, my eyes, after a while, it gets to the point where it's the same way with novels. I'm like, I gotta skip this description shit. Get me to the dialogue.
Oh, so it's like the later Wheel of Time
in just the wrong place.
It's like the later Wheel of Time. It's like the later Wheel of Time books where Robert Jordan spends forever describing clothing.
Yeah, or Anne Rice books where you're like, beautiful room, get on.
Yes, let's get back to the plot point where vampires are from Atlantis or whatever.
Oh God, never reading that book. Swear to God, never doing it. Never gonna happen.
I haven't either. I just know it exists. But Ponari, he manages to restrain himself long enough to tell Helen to run, and he attacks Nosferatu with a spar, only to get his heart ripped out for his troubles. And it's not long after that the weapon is finally ready, and they shoot the vampire with it, causing him to flee below deck, where they see that the ship has started to fill with water, and Alec takes a moment to behead Ponari's heartless corpse before they make their next move. and they see it there close to land, having been blown all the way up the English coast to Whitby Harbor, and the captain lashes himself to the wheel to keep the ship on course, while Alec and Maluko head down into the ship after the vampire, and Helen drops torches to light the place up for them, so she kind of fills a function here.
A little bit, yeah. She's helpful.
Yeah, they find several of the boxes floating in the water, as well as the nearby corpse of Petrovsky. They are confronted by Nosferatu, who slashes Maluko's throat and wounds Alec with his claws. And on deck, the captain is impaled and killed when a boom comes loose and swings towards him. And this leaves Helen alone, with the vampire soon moving in on her. Alec comes in the hold and takes Maluko's talisman and war club from him as he dies, his body being swept out to sea. And he emerges on deck where Nosferatu has cornered Helen against the edge of the ship with the sea at her back. And the ship bucks in the waves, and Helen is thrown overboard, and Nosferatu gets tangled in ropes. This is just a hilarious image of it hanging upside down and the ropes going, ah!
Yeah, that's always a good, funny trick to do.
Yeah, and Alec makes a choice, so he hurls the war club at the vampire, but decides he's going to jump overboard to save Helen from drowning. And the storm comes to an end, and the ship drifts into Whitby Harbor, and the vampire has disappeared from the ropes, only for a big black wolf to leap from the vessel and onto the shore. And as the townsfolk and Coast Guard approach the ship and find the captain's log, Alec pulls Helen to the surface, and we see she was the woman from that opening shot, and brings her to safety on a rocky beach down the coast. And we're then shown a POV of the wolf stalking the people of Whitby, and a title card comes on the screen before it ends. And I'm going to read that out, if I can get to the page. Whitby Harbor, Northern England, August 8th, 1897. Of the Demeter, its fate remains a mystery of the sea. No survivors were found, but for one animal described as a great dog, which walked out briskly to infect a country whose terrible future may have just arrived. So this almost seems to imply that whatever would happen after this in this version of Dracula would be very different.
It's a possibility, yeah. I mean, unless they're just talking about what he did do, which was potentially bad enough. We don't know how much damage he did because they weren't looking at all his kills in the original novel. And then, of course, there's Lucy and all the kids she was nomming on. So.
Yeah.
I do like the imagery, though. You know, I do like the imagery at the end, but probably just because it ties in so well with the Dracula story itself, that moment.
Yeah, that moment.
It's an important moment.
Yep. And it's described, when you see the POV of the wolf, it's called Predator's POV, and I'm like, oh, so he's seeing in infrared? But
No, but you're not seeing in full color.
Nope, colorblind.
Yep.
But no, this is actually, I mean, it's got its problems, and I did kind of make fun of it here and there. This is not a bad...
It's got its merits, too.
Yeah, it's not a bad script. It's actually a pretty solid little contained horror script. You know, the whole thing's set on a boat. It's got some really good scenes. The characters aren't horribly annoying at any point. And I don't know, it's a pretty solid, workable little thing. And I would be curious to see what all the various different rewrites of this looked like. You know, see what the original spec was like, what the Schwenke version was like, what later versions may have been like. It would be interesting to see this, and it might actually be getting made now. I mean, who knows at this point, but...
You sent me a link about that.
Yeah, because the way this development sort of went after this is that Schwenke was attached to it for years. He left, and then Marcus Nispel, who's known for the Chainsaw Massacre remake and the Friday the 13th remake and that USA version of Frankenstein with Vincent Perez. He was supposed to direct it, but he went and did that horrible Conan remake instead. And so he left, and then a director who I think was like an Oscar nominee called Stefan Ruzowitzki, he was attached, and he cast in roles. He cast Noomi Rapace as the stowaway, but I think she was called, like her name had changed by that point in the various articles I had read.
Okay.
And they didn't say who the character was, but they had cast Ben Kingsley, and I'm guessing he would have been playing Ponari.
Yeah, maybe Ponari, or they would have tried to do something crazy, and no, that wouldn't. Never mind.
But I think he would have been Ponari. I think that would have made the most sense. And it would not have been the last time he played a red herring if this had gotten made, because, you know, Iron Man 3, the notorious twist, only here he's not watching a soccer game when it happens.
It's just hilarious to bring up Ben Kingsley, because he's kind of the inspiration for a character my husband and I are in a story we're working on for a series we're working.
Okay.
It's just like, so I have very distinct images of Ben Kingsley when I think of him. So I'm like, well, it wouldn't be for Ponari.
But Ruzowitzki left, and David Slade was supposed to direct, and this was after he had done after 30 Days of Night and after the Twilight movie he directed, he signed on to do this, and the casting was still staying the same. And then he left to go direct a reboot of Daredevil for Fox, which that never happened, and we got the Netflix series instead.
Question is, was he slated before or after he had something to do with Hannibal, the TV series?
It would have been, it would have been before. Because
okay.
this was around 2011, 2012.
Right, yeah.
And then, after he left, a couple of years later, Neil Marshall, the guy who did Dog Soldiers and The Descent, he was signed on to do this. And he was attached to it for a few years, and he apparently was, working pretty hard at, pre-production, trying to figure out, what all the various practical effects he wanted to use would have been. And it was during this period that supposedly Viggo Mortensen had been offered a role, and it was, and it doesn't match anything in this script because it says, he's being offered the male lead, Henry Clemens, who is not a character in this.
Well, regardless, I kind of want to see that movie right now.
Hell,
I haven't seen Viggo in a whole lot, but I do like Viggo.
I mean, he hasn't been in a whole lot lately either, so.
Well, I think I've seen 3 movies he's in, period. So, no, 4 movies. I forgot about A Perfect Murder. Okay, yep.
I mean, I've
seen the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and then I've seen The Prophecy, A Perfect Murder, and that was The Road, right?
The Road is the post-apocalyptic one.
Yeah. Yep, that was him.
Yeah, that was it. That was the last major thing I saw him in was The Road. He's been kind of here and there since then.
So it's I know he's prolific, but I haven't seen the profile personally, so.
I mean, I believe he actually said even if he was offered, he would not have done a Hobbit cameo.
Nah, I don't blame him for that.
It would not have fit anyways, but yeah, and then it just kind of went away for a few years, and Neil Marshall ended up doing that Hellboy reboot that came out this year.
I can't say anything on it. I haven't seen it. I'm a diehard Ron Perlman fangirl, so I can't bring myself.
Oh, it's bad for reasons other than that, but no, that's the thing he ended up making, but for 4 years or so, because the last word was around 2015-ish. This just kind of went away and no one actually heard anything about it, and then right after I send you this script and we decide we're going to do this episode, right?
Yep.
I just do a quick search just to read some stuff, see if there's any script reviews out there or whatnot. And lo and behold, just this month, Amblin Entertainment has picked up the rights to the project, and they've offered it to, I am going to butcher this name, but Andre Overdahl, who just did Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and he did Troll Hunter and this movie called The Autopsy of Jane Doe, which I haven't seen, but I've heard a million things about.
Excellent movie.
Okay, I need to check that one out. But I liked Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and I really liked Troll Hunter. Troll Hunter is one of the better found footage movies. But he's been offered that, and he's supposed to, if he does do it, he's supposed to get to work on it as soon as he finishes shooting The Long Walk. So.
Yep.
I'm I kind of want both those to happen, actually.
Yes, I do want both of those to happen quite badly. But you know me, I'm also a King fan, and I'm I don't care how difficult it is to put on film, I want it.
The Long Walk shouldn't be that hard. I mean, you could probably film that movie for $50 if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, I'm sure there are King dollar babies of it out.
No, he only sells short stories for dollar babies.
Okay, got it.
He put out a new list of dollar babies recently, actually, and I saw Dedication was on the list, and I'm I kind of hope someone tries to do that.
I don't know Dedication. Unfortunately, I am not as entranced with the short stories.
Okay,
There's
I won't
2 or 3 short
I won't spoil Dedication for you, but it's in Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Read that story. Okay. It is disgusting and fucked up.
I read some of his short Earth stories. I had Full Dark No Stars, and I love all the stories in that one. But those are slightly longer short stories.
Yeah, those are more novellas.
Langolier's length, but not short. Yeah, I like his novellas. I think the only stories of his I like are A Very Tight Place and Chattery Teeth. I don't know why, but
is a very tight place. Is that the porta pot one?
That's the porta potty.
Yes, I remember that. But
and Survivor Type.
Oh yeah, that one.
Survivor Type in high school, actually.
But yeah, that's now we're off that tangent. That was that's basically the episode of Last Voyage of the Demeter. So it was an interesting read, and it's very competently written. And I'd like to see them finally make it. And I'm curious to see how it's changed since then.
Yeah, it's one of those scripts that you're like, it's in the middle ground there. Like it exists. It's not great. It's not terrible. And depending on who makes it and how, it could go either way.
Yeah, and I think Overdahl has enough style to him that he could do a good job of it. And so could Neil Marshall, but Neil Marshall might have turned it into like a little too much of a silly bloodbath.
Quite possibly.
But yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up. And so yeah, as usual, if you enjoyed it, check out all those social media links and whatnot from the beginning, and the Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, and iTunes and all that stuff. And until next time, guys, bye.
Thank you for having me.
Not a problem.